Calling the meeting back in order. Give everybody a chance to settle in their seats, including board members. This might be a proper time to kind of just inform the public on what this part of the meeting will consist of. As a goal to clearly state to our community what this board's decision is on the proposal that has been before us since January, we will have at least one go around with questions, and if necessary, we'll have two go arounds of questions, and then we will have one go around or two go rounds where you can make your statements of your position and what you are in favor of or against, or your concerns or your support is. We will then hopefully entertain a motion again pertaining to the proposal in front of us. If there's no conclusion to that process, the chair will then accept amendments and motion for any counter proposal. But we will, since we had the proposal, we're not going to do a bait and switch on the public this late in the game. We will be voting on this proposal first. So first, this is your time for the board. This is limited to the board now. Any questions? I think with those three, okay, we do have a question. Melody, go ahead. And this is just the question part.
Thank you. Actually, I have questions for you, Susan. I appreciate the detailed presentation that you've given. It's very helpful. My first question actually has to do with the contingency fund. And what I'd like to know is, what are some examples? And I know, and this is not the federal, meaning not the federal dollars, not anything that's restricted, but what typically would we use contingency dollars for?
Sure, that's a good question. Historically, we've used contingency primarily when something has changed legislatively that was a last-minute change or a mid-year change. So, and this happened a couple times to us between 2010 and 2016, where either we lost equalization aid during the course of the year, or base aid was cut during the course of a year, and we had to come in with contingency to basically make up the lost revenues. That's been the most recent use, is related to issues with revenues, typically coming out of the state.
Okay.
And then as dollars through Gannon increased and our budgetary totals increased, we have been trying to get contingency to somewhat match that same percentage that it was back in 2010, 11 to the total budget. We're sitting at about that same percentage today.
Okay. So it's a little over 31 million.
Correct.
And we've carried that over, I know, at least how many years? I know
It's been that level since 21, I believe.
Okay, so two. And I'll have several questions, actually. The second question that I have, and they're really not in any particular order. So the second question is, what are our options, and this may be for superintendent, I'm not sure, but what are our options for all-day kindergarten, if indeed this motion passes, closing Cleveland and Park?
All-day pre-K?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, just making sure. We're currently evaluating that. A couple people that spoke tonight are advocating for all-day pre-K, which is something we want to continue and hopefully expand. The state does not fund all-day pre-K, so it's an additional expense for the district. But we do have other schools that have all-day pre-K other than just Cleveland and Park. So right now we're evaluating neighboring facilities as far as the welcoming schools to see what they can accommodate, if they can accommodate, but those decisions haven't been made yet.
Right. And so what are the numbers that are at currently Park and Cleveland? Because I know that there's probably a wait list for all-day kindergarten. I don't think we're actually filling the need, so we definitely would need to make sure that we offer at a different site, or yes.
Yes, it is a high-demand program. I can't speak specifically to the numbers in the
Okay.
buildings off the top of my head.
Okay.
But overall, it is a high-demand program. I think a lot of parents, even staff, take advantage of it and use it. So I believe it could be, once we get through, the next year or so, could be a point of investment for our district. But it is an additional cost because those students aren't funded for the whole day. We take on the cost of the second part of that day.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you. So my next question is going to be for you, Susan, and that is, our fiscal year ends 9/24. Does it end September?
Our fiscal year ends June 30th.
So
The
June
federal
30th.
funds related to the COVID relief funding has to be expended by 9/30, so that may be where that date's coming from.
Yes.
But in
Okay.
our case, our federal funding will be fully expended by June 30th this year.
By our end, fiscal year
Correct.
end. Okay. And just a couple of items regarding Phase 3. So with looking at the your actual slide, there weren't the actual even a range in terms of when the review would be done, because we're talking about 6 different departments, if I recall. So when the review would be done, as well as, I think if we knew when the review would be done, then we would probably know approximately how many FTEs or consolidated areas or programs we would be looking at, correct? Once the review is done?
So the reviews have commenced. We have started Phase 3 work. It is what I'll call a laborious process to go through each division and department, and really have to. It's not as simple as we want to cut 8% out of your department, because you really have to look at what are those people doing, because where we have had some issues with district level cuts is those unintended consequences to that action. Because when we cut a district level staff without fully understanding how that work impacts schools, typically what happens is that work ends up going back to schools and then becomes a workload issue for teachers. So it is more than learning services or finance or whoever going in and say, we want an across the board 8% cut. We really want to be intentional about understanding what are they doing, is there value, right? Where's the evidence that this is a value to schools, or is it a legal necessity, right? We have to have something. So that work is ongoing and can be ongoing really for several months. As far as, an either or, right? If you knew you had, we will not get to $33 million, there's not even $33 million of spend in the administrative areas, right? So it can't take on the full cut, if that's what you're asking me.
No,
Okay,
not
maybe
necessarily.
maybe I misunderstood that.
Not necessarily. No, I'm asking it as a viable option, because I know in one of the latter screens that it's stated that it is an option. We can either do option 1, option 2, a mix of option 2 and 3, but factually, we don't have all of the information regarding option 3.
So,
I don't.
Well, I think that slide you were talking about, option 1, 2, and 3 on that slide, not phase one, phase two, phase three. Is that correct?
Correct.
So,
So-
does that make sense?
Okay, well then I'll rephrase. For knowing exactly how we're going to be able to raise these dollars or identify where the dollars are, I believe that there was a con under, and I guess I would just need to go back to the actual, can we have it up?
Which-
So
which
that-
slide?
Slide
that
36,
particular-
either 36 or 37, I
Yeah.
don't know which one.
Let's look at it. So, building closures. Yes, so under building closures, though, it does give, as a con, timing and no master plan. So, when you're looking at phase three, I don't know exactly what's going to come out of the review that's being done, so I have no idea of how that's going to impact, once again, either consolidating different buildings and/or any specific reductions in positions. I don't know those things, as well as the con of the timing with the master plan. When will I know that, I guess is the question.
So, I think for phase three and master plan are two different things.
I do understand.
Yeah, phase three, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're hoping to get between 6 and 8 million. Is that fair? Of
That's
of
our
further
first goal,
reduction?
Right.
What's that?
That's our first goal.
That's our
right.
first goal. So of those 6 boxes that were up there, you add all those together, that would be between 6 and 8 million. And then the rest of that gap would be the cash reserves that we've been talking about.
All
So
right.
does that answer your question? I
Yeah,
think
so
that's what
we're
you're
looking
asking.
we're looking at a little over 16 million, maybe even 17 million outstanding once we do phase 1 and 2, correct? How much is it that's left over?
Is that-
16.8, so right at 17 million. You're saying that 8 million will come from phase 3, and then the additional would come from cash reserves. So
Correct.
we're talking about, what, 9 million? A
If
little
we-
less?
If we get to 8, we would be at a little less than 9, so about half cash, half in cuts.
Okay, and then that would more than likely come from that contingency fund
Correct.
at some point. Okay. All right, so my other question then has to do with ESSER dollars and the bonuses that teachers received.
Yes.
Where did that funding come from?
They were federal dollar. Those were part of the federal package
The federal package
for
of,
COVID relief.
so it was COVID relief?
Correct.
Which
It
we
was
know as ESSER dollars?
Correct.
Excuse me? I'm sorry. So with that, what's left in that fund right now?
So what we're finishing this fiscal year as far as that spend, it's primarily behavior support. So psychologists, behavior positions, para support, benefits, additional hours, and the maintaining of the budget. And then there's a smattering of other small projects. But those are the big spend. That's how we'll finish the year.
Okay. And how are we proposing to pay for the additional transportation that's actually purported, that we'll be able to assist with transportation, particularly for, I believe, Park and Clark, or Park and
Jardine.
Park and Jardine?
Yeah, and we'll talk about that once the decision's made. But the transportation footprint will be reduced,
Okay.
right? Because, if we have fewer schools to bus kids to, so we'll be able to absorb that. And I may be speaking out of turn, but I think we'll be able to absorb that in the current contract.
We
with
do
our
not
transportation.
anticipate a transportation
That's
increase
a good way to
related to any of the actions we're taking. We've priced the moves, and we think we can do it cost neutral.
Okay. So we wouldn't be identifying any additional revenue dollars
No,
for that?
we may end up applying for some additional McKinney-Vento funds for the state.
Okay.
Wouldn't be a lot, but it would help. that may be an area we hit. But otherwise, we believe transportation, other than taking its normal contractual increase, won't have an increase.
Okay. All right. I think that has answered my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Melody, and we will definitely, if you feel like you need a second round, we'll definitely call on you again. Again, just a reminder from the audience, no laughing, clapping, booing, yelling out, that type of thing. Appreciate your cooperation on that. Julie.
You did an excellent job, as always. Thank you. I know this is very difficult for you, just as it is for all of us. And you did a really good job just making it simple and walking through the steps and explaining, and I really appreciate that. One piece of one part of funding, which I know doesn't really impact our decision, and so it hasn't been a part of your presentations, but it is something that was brought up in our speaker presentations, and I know it is something that does in fact impact our bottom line. And that is, could you just talk to us briefly about special ed and the whole concept of our desire for both the federal government and the state government to fully fund special ed, and what that means and how that impacts our bottom line?
Sure. Try to keep this as simple in a very complicated topic that is the special ed calculation. Special ed is a little different than how the regular formula works, and that it kind of backs into the FTE per student. You actually get special education aid based on the number of teachers, special ed teachers you employ, and the number of special ed paras you employ. And by state law, as you fund your special ed programs, they're supposed to fund 92% of excess cost. They back out whatever federal funding you receive in that calculation. Because the federal government, who at one time contemplated funding SPED at like 40%, is funding SPED at more like 17%. So that gap, right, needs to be made up somewhere. The state looks at it and says, well, but that's the federal government being short, not necessarily us. And the federal government's going to do what the federal government does. So school districts are kind of left with, well, who funds it, right? And unfortunately, at the end of the day, we have to offer those services to students. That is it's a mandate. We cannot decide that we're just not going to offer them because we don't have the funds. You have to provide the funds. And so we end up transferring dollars in addition to the state aid to cover special ed expenditures. Our transfer out of general fund and the local option budget is a $50 million transfer number. The statutory shortfall running through that calculation is 19 million and change if the state met its obligation. So you hear it a couple ways depending on who you talk to, whether or not the state should be covering what districts have to transfer to cover SPED, or should they cover the statutory requirement. Either way, we're short special ed funding at least $19 million, probably closer to the 50 if you really, but again, statutorily it's 19. Does that help a little bit?
Yes. Well, and that's the state statutorily is short 19. Correct. But you said also in your conversation that originally the feds, when they created the law for what services we needed to provide, they originally committed 40%, but are only at 17, 18%. Right. So when we talk about fully funding, we're talking about fully fund what you told us you would give us, not pay every penny that we pay in special ed costs.
Correct.
Which, again, that isn't that doesn't impact our decision tonight, but if we were fully funded, we wouldn't be having these questions.
Well, you'd have 19 million more dollars at least in that in that revenue line that you don't have today.
However, even when that is said, we go back to your slide 13, realizing that this is not only a financial question, that the financial question is clearly an important piece, and it's probably the piece that forces a decision, probably. But the other items that are out there that, that are still concerns of the district and still items that need to be dealt with and solved and thought about, even apart from just our financial question.
Correct.
Thank you, Julie. Knock?
Thank you all. I have several categories of questions. The first will be on funding. So my first question, so in addition to fully funding special education and also keeping in mind part of the context will be for phase 3, I'm looking beyond this. So besides fully funding special ed, what are some other revenue-raising mechanisms that we need to consider?
From a statutory, from the state level, or just in general?
In general.
I know that as part of our platform legislatively, we've been advocating for a change in the CTE weighting because we really don't believe that as a program, the particular weighting per student is really providing the funding necessary to make that a really robust program for the level of need in the state, right? So it's not just what districts want, it's how do we best meet the business need out there? How do we train our students to provide what employers are looking for? And so CTE funding is one of those areas that is kind of on our advocacy radar. So is the virtual program, particularly related to how you're automatically kind of deducted the minute you don't have a full-time student in virtual, you have a part-time student in virtual. So really looking at, is there ways for the state to come in and help with a more blended model funding mechanism for those kids that may want to do some partial virtual, but may want to be partial bricks and mortar. And there's no mechanism, right, for that in the public education piece. So if students want that, if families are making choices that way, they're seeking alternatives outside of us, and we want to be able to provide things like that. I don't know if the superintendent has some other thoughts there.
Well, and I think I know where you're going with some of this, but the other thing I'd throw out there would be grant opportunities. We do apply, for a number of federal grants. We received, some. We applied for a pretty substantial one this year, didn't get it, but it would have done some of the things that Susan was just describing as far as CT programs, credentialing kids, and all that kind of stuff. So we do, unlike higher ed, that's not one of our main funding streams, but it is another avenue that we look into.
In terms of deferred maintenance, are there any historical preservation grants? And if so, has a district applied for them?
We've looked at that whole historical perspective. It comes with its own set of challenges, which is you have, the money is difficult, right, to go, and there's a lot of requirements. But then you are restricted as far as how you actually conduct the work in that building and what you can do to that historical place. So it's the double-edged sword. There might be funding there, but then you're tied to what you can and can't do once it's on the historical register. So we really struggled with that with the McCormick Museum, which is part of the reason why we're like, besides the fact that it's not an active school, we can't meet these criteria to repair this building in the way it's supposed to be repaired on the register. So it is something we've looked at. We have sought options related to funding. It hasn't gone terribly far.
And then the next set of questions will be on the school building closures, specifically with any progress monitoring. So I was wondering if what kind of data you guys were tracking with regard to staff retention. specifically those at closing schools, those that are proposed for closure?
So I can field that. We do plan to track staff retention for, we're offering some retention bonuses, some extra days of packing and packing supplies and those sorts of things. But we do plan to track, who comes back with us in the fall, and then probably sometime in the winter, some sort of satisfaction with how it went. I think it's an important factor. We're trying to make this, if the board votes to do this, to make it so we have answers and things ready to go for staff as far as retention goes.
And then for the students at the proposed closing schools that are moving to their welcoming schools, what kind of academic data are we assessing, both quantitative and qualitative?
Superintendent, do you want to
Yeah,
handle
I
that
can
one
do
as
that.
well?
I was writing it down
Sorry.
to make sure I cover it. Quantitative-wise, it's not turnkey as far as their system goes, but it's definitely possible to track those outcomes for students. There's a lot of variables that go into a student's academic performance, but that's definitely something we can track. Qualitative-wise, as Susan and I were kind of reflecting on some of these conversations about next steps, getting that from an individual student might have its own challenges, but getting that from the family and parents is probably really, really critical. And really understanding what the impact has been, if any, positive or negative, or like kind of the anecdotal piece. I think that's what you're asking for. But it's possible that we could do both of those from a parent perspective and from a student kind of data perspective.
And would we also be looking at chronic absenteeism as well as part of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we could track that too.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the last question I have for this set of category, are there any neighborhood level indicators that we as a district should be considering unintended consequence-wise, or more simply put, how can we work with our neighborhoods, our city and county governments to address some of those very valid concerns about urban blight and decay, gentrification, segregation?
Yeah, good question. I think once decisions are final, that gives us, opens the door to start having those conversations. I've met with the mayor and a number of city council members about, what the proposal is, criteria that we've used, et cetera. And I think there's definitely some opportunities to work together when it comes to ensuring that our entire city is still well maintained and taken care of. We talked a little bit today about we've had empty buildings that we've maintained in the district for years, and those are not full of graffiti and don't have high grass and don't have all the things you might worry about. We maintain them. We keep the lights on. We keep clean and safe as best we can. So we haven't had that experience over the history of the district in the past, I'd say 20 or so years, with any of those buildings. But that doesn't mean it's not an invalid concern. It's definitely a good point. So
Apologies in advance. I have a lot of questions. I just want to get clarity, want to make sure that our public gets clarity as well. So in terms of the Phase 3 considerations, Phase 3 cut considerations, with one-on-one technologies for elementary school students, would this be factored in Phase 3 cuts, or would this be a longer-term conversation?
I'll speak kind of big picture, and then you can talk the actual budget, because I don't know the actual budget answer to that. Bigger picture, where we are, again, gathering feedback from parents, gathering feedback from principals, gathering feedback from staff about the role that these devices play. one-to-one technology, K-12, was pretty critical in a remote environment, or mostly a remote environment. But as those devices are aging, and as we're in the budget situation we are, we're going to have to make decisions about the appropriate role that technology plays in a classroom as far as frequency and ratio of device. I would anticipate we move away from a one-to-one ratio at an elementary level, and then kind of yet to be determined what that looks like at a secondary level. We're also hearing feedback from parents about a desire to decrease or minimize screen time. And I think that's another kind of output of COVID, is that we were so heavily on screens, especially at a young age, that there's a little bit of a feel that we need to get away from that unless it's absolutely necessary in the classroom. That's the feedback we're hearing really from the field. I don't know if next year's budget has an implication on one-to-one or not.
So the hardware that we purchased with federal dollars still has life, right? Where there's still some useful life in those particular machines. So we're not at a critical stage of what do we do as far as a replacement plan, but that's not very far away. And at this point, there's limited dollars available in capital. So yes, we would have to reduce that tech footprint, particularly at the elementary, pre-K type levels, perhaps even some at middle school, in order to maintain the same budget it had kind of in that pre-COVID period. But that's pretty much capital outlay, not on the operations side.
And then this is my last question in general. So if I wanted to make a motion to split the package and vote on each school individually on its merits, that would not be possible. We would have to vote on the package deal first.
It would definitely be possible if the plan that we've talked to the public since January on fails. It would definitely be possible.
Okay, thank you.
I just did, my concern, Knock, was I did not want to advertise this for 3 months, that this is the plan, this is what we're voting on, and then change up on them at the last moment. That was the motivation behind that. Thank you, Knock. Did you have any more questions?
That's all for now.
Okay, and then Melody's already signed in for round 2. So if you think of something for round 2, you're more than free to ask. Diane.
Thank you, Susan. If this recommendation is adopted, can we please further explain the supports that students have at their current schools and what that would look like in their new schools? Like, we've heard a lot of feedback from parents about, my student has a para and a teacher, they have a team of staff members that work with my student. I'm concerned that that team will not be with my student any further. Can you paint a picture for the parents what that would look like?
Sure, and Superintendent can add to these comments as well. And a lot of what we heard was special ed related, and special education programming has always been a little bit unique as far as the programs are placed at kind of strategic places around the city. We don't have the same programs in every single building. So, as special ed kind of finalizes its plan and sends out information in April, like it does every year, every parent gets notification of what happens. The intent, right, as far as how we're talking to staff is, we really do want a team that might be at one of the closing schools and the new program is over at one of the welcoming, that team goes to the welcoming school, intact, teacher paras. Now, we're trying to balance that with giving teachers voice in this process. Do they want to go to the welcoming school? I think a lot of our teachers, what we're hearing, do. They want to support those students. They want to keep those services intact. But we definitely want teachers to feel that they have options through this process as well. But when HR is having those conversations, it is this is something we can do, right? If this is something we can work with you, we can, as these positions then come open, because we haven't done any of that work related to welcoming schools because the decision has not been made. Once the decision is made, if we're moving forward, then all of those dominoes start to fall as far as new positions and new buildings and vacancies open and all of that process kind of starts rolling. Special ed will be a component of that, and teams, if that's what they're wanting to do, we highly encourage that whole team to move with the program. Now, that particular special ed student may or may not be in that particular program. Those are options that the SPED program itself has to kind of look at the needs of that student and determine the best placement for services. But generally speaking, yes, we would want that team and those students to go into the new program with the same teacher and the same support. Because we do recognize, right, that that's very good for SPED students to have that continuity as much as possible. Some of the alternative programs like newcomers, right, again, our newcomer teachers would follow those programs if that's what the teachers want to do, right? Highly encourage the teachers to move, and paras to move with those programs to the new locations. They will need those staff. That's part of that $5 million add at the new buildings, is those staff moving with those programs.
So what I'm hearing is some, maybe not all, but most of these programs that are currently offered at these schools that are on the list will be moving to new facilities, and we want the teams to move with that program along with hopefully the students.
I think that's a fair desire. It's not going to be a perfect situation, right? There's always variables in this, but that is the hope, is that we're moving special ed programs to their respective new location and staff follow to the greatest extent possible.
Okay, thank you. And what measures are in place to ensure that class sizes will remain reasonable? And can we talk about the reasonable size? I know that's been a discussion that's been brought up many times.
So the elementary office, the secondary office, and the budget office are basically, and have been for a number of years, working hand in hand on class size. Monitoring for, when we believe class sizes are really getting too big, right? And for elementary, even though I think the upward limit on the board policy is like 35, we start looking more like at 26-ish. We might have them wait a minute, but that class size starts getting to 27, 28, 29. We're probably looking at some sort of substitute for a short term while we look for some additional staff. Now, 100% every case, every time, there's always circumstances. Sometimes it's a medical situation and the other teachers are taking on those students for a short period of time. So I'm not going to say 100% every time we address every situation perfectly, but as a general rule, the elementary office will reach out when a class size is getting into that range and say, we need allocation. And if it's 25, we're kind of looking, going, that's in the middle still. As we get up over 25 and how that impacts everything else in that building, then we look at that and say, okay, can we get at least a long-term sub, or do we have the potential of making a mid-year hire of some sort?
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Melody?
Thank you. So this is really just a point of clarification. It's follow-up for what Knock has asked the question. Will there be an opportunity for additional motions to be made, or are we saying that the motion that will be considered first is the only motion, and that's the recommendation that's coming in front of us?
Yeah, let me try to clarify that. Depending on what we've advertised to the public what we are considering, we'll take a vote on that. If anyone, once we know if that passes or fails, that will determine any kind of substitute motions or amendments and that type of thing.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is there's the initial motion, there's no room for any additional motion prior to the recommendation or the recommended motion. Is that correct?
We will attempt a motion on the proposal that we've been talking about since January with our public and through these public hearings.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Melody. Knock?
Another point of clarification, is there a particular board policy that prevents us from making a prior motion to the one that's proposed on the table?
There is a board policy that says we do not follow Robert's Rules of Order, and it gives a wide breadth of flexibility on the board chair to make those type of decisions, yes.
And that's board policy 0200.
Yes. If you need I will make sure that anyone who has concerns about that can get that policy. I think that concludes the question part of it. At this point, we'll go around and everyone will have an opportunity to make a statement or make their case on the proposal that's before us. And hopefully somebody will make a motion. I'm sorry, what? Oh, okay. Kathy?
Thank you. Thank you to
For the
every,
public record, we're now in the part of the motion and discussion on the proposal.
oh, okay. Thank you, everyone who shared from your heart. I know this is a difficult time, so I speak to you tonight not only as a board member, but as a mother of 3 well-educated, successful adults who are products of USD 259 education. It was 1999 when our oldest son was preparing for kindergarten. His imagination and innovation at the age of 5 prompted me to inquire about magnet schools. Being successful in finding the right school for him, we went through the lottery and we were selected and enrolled him at Kellogg Elementary School. I still remember his kindergarten teachers' names, Mrs. Hartshorn and Mrs. Davis. We were so grateful for the 2 of them. I was a classroom parent volunteering wherever needed. First grade came and we were excited to return to Kellogg as relationships had begun the year before. We even had summer play dates with friends while us moms began to bond. We became a family. We were tight. Although we all lived in different areas of town, that did not stop any of us from making sure our children stayed connected. At the end of the first grade, we were told that our school would be shutting down, closing the doors. There wasn't an explanation. I was on my own to find a different school for Michael to attend. It felt like the floor opened up and swallowed me. I not only needed to find the best school for him, but I also needed to help him in his confusion and sadness. Kellogg was the central community hub. It was a place where generations of families attended. There were memories and relationships attached to this school. We moms talked and comforted one another, still determined that no matter where our children were placed, we would still maintain the friendships that were developed. At the beginning of his 2nd grade year, we were not only going to a new school, but now his little brother would be starting kindergarten at the welcoming school. It was McLean Elementary Magnet. We knew Michael might have a challenging time transitioning, and the welcoming teachers were made aware of this. They were wonderful and so accepting of Michael. I'll never forget the end of the first day. Both boys were smiling after school. And Michael said, "Mommy, I met a new friend today." Both of our sons thrived at Michael's new school. I share this in-depth emotional story because I do understand what our parents and our students are going through. This is a very emotional and distressing thing to face for everyone. The decision you might hear this evening was not taken lightly, but with sober thinking and logic. It has been difficult for me personally to remove myself emotionally and think this through with sound judgment, because I have been in your shoes. I have attended every listening session. I have answered emails. I've responded to the plethora of letters I have received. I've spoken on the phone. I've met with parents, and I have heard every word you have said. My empathy is extremely high. I have asked administration many times, do we really need to do this? I have studied the budget changes to our district. I have researched the decline enrollment of our district. I have received thorough explanation of the reasons why this has been proposed. With the decline of elementary enrollment, data clearly shows that since 2018, the district has had a 16.3% decline, and the trend indicates that this will continue for the next 10 years. The consequences of remote learning as a result of school closures during COVID drove parents to send their students to private schools or chose to homeschool. The district lost 2,600 students. As you've seen in the presentation this evening, the majority use of the federal money the district received was for learning recovery and safe learning environments for our students. As Ms. Willis indicated at our January 22nd Board of Education meeting, quote, "This needed to happen 3 years ago," end quote. Now we have too many buildings and not enough students to fill the classrooms. We need to understand that the more money we spend on students that are not in the classroom, the less money we spend on students that are here. We've been spending money on empty seats. This decision cannot be delayed or pushed down the road anymore without putting this district in serious jeopardy. If we do not take drastic action right now, we could, in effect, create a situation where our school district cannot survive because we didn't take the measures to stop the bleeding. While closing schools is a difficult decision, it is absolutely necessary for the academic and financial sustainability of our district. This journey is not just about numbers and budgets. It's about creating a more equitable, inclusive, and thriving educational environment for all of our students. It will create greater access to the resources they deserve. If we don't move forward with this plan, we will definitely be laying off teachers, paras, and staff. Then our problems will become bigger, as we already have a teacher shortage. Moving forward with the school closures ensures that every classroom in our district will have a certified teacher educating your child. Currently, we cannot say this. The reason school boards exist is to ensure that every child, your child, gets a quality education. Because I am an optimist, I try to find the silver lining in this. Merriam-Webster defines a silver lining as a consoling or hopeful prospect. Unfortunately, the connotation is such that we cannot find the silver lining without first knowing the pain, the heartache, the sadness, and the despair from which we need to be consoled or to find some hope. And I know at this time you cannot see the silver lining. We must walk through it, and you will not be walking through this alone. And that's how we will find the silver lining. My son Michael rebounded quickly after his school closing, maintaining those Kellogg Fresh friendships and getting new ones. And I am able to look back and see in retrospect, this experience was not as difficult as I thought it would be at that time. Thanks to the exceptional and outstanding teachers of USD 259, I am confident that your child will be cared for as much as at their welcoming schools as they are at their leaving schools. Therefore, I will be voting to move forward with this proposal, knowing this is the best for our district and to prevent any layoffs to our outstanding educators and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. It's pretty rare that a decision comes to the board where it is usually a situation where the decision will either help the student and our staff, or it will hurt our staff. rarely does it come before us where we are asked to make a decision to create hurt first with the promise of helping our students, staff, and community in the near future. I've always said that my priorities and my values are to keep graduations rates high, to improve reading, English, and math scores, improve student outcomes, which includes improving behaviors that a lot of our teachers face, and retaining staff. If I want to stand by those values and stand by our strategic plan, which I think reflects those values, then we will have to keep our mental health and our child study team supports in place. We will need to maintain a level and perhaps even grow our para supports. We will have to maintain jobs and reasonable class sizes and caseloads. We will need to protect wages. Classroom is not, and let me emphasize the wages part in that I thought it was very important that it was brought up tonight that it is not our staff's fault that there is a declining birth rate. It is not our staff's fault that there was a pandemic. Matter of fact, we increased their workload during that time. So protecting wages for the future are critical in my mind. Classroom vacancies need to continue to be filled with certified teachers, and we must continue to work on student and family engagement. The only way we do that is by creating enough flexibility in our budget in the next 2 to 3 years to do that. If we are not able to make the hard decisions to create a future that will be innovative, creative, and vibrant for our staff, if we're not able to make that decision now, then we will see everything that we've worked for start to feel the stress. And I am thankful for this community for the way they've engaged with us on this. And I think it's also clear that everyone has the best interest of our students and our staff at heart, and I appreciate everyone. And I think we as a community should be proud of what we have exchanged in information during this process. Melody?
Thank you. The first thing that I need to be able to say quite clearly is that in my opportunity to attend each of the 3 listening sessions and participate in the restorative circles, to have the opportunity to actually listen to members of our community, also family of students that attend our district schools, and then to, of course, be present at the listening public hearing. I felt so honored to be a board member at this time, at large, to be able to represent. Because I heard from you, so many of you, that you love this district. You love our teachers, and I'm a former teacher. You love the buildings. You love what goes on there. So it was not very difficult for me to not only truly listen, but to also feel what you were going through and will be going through in terms of loss. So with that, I believe we can all agree all of us can agree that there are reasons to openly explore options for closing schools, including our changing demographics. We've heard it. Lower birth rates, the impact of higher interest rates on housing prices that, details on who can actually purchase for a price a house in our urban district where their kids can go to school, as well as the potential impact of open enrollment, as we heard from Susan, and that huge looming legislature that we have that refuses, quite honestly, it is a refusal to fund our district appropriately and as it should be. And that includes special education. So we have those issues, points of reference, demographics that I think we can all agree there are reasons to openly explore options for closing schools. We even know that across our country, K through 12 education continues to experience shortages that we've heard. Teachers, nurses, mental health professionals, bus drivers. That totally impacts our educating and the education of our students. My challenge with this is, I believe that the district could have approached this issue surrounding the proposed closing of the 6 schools differently by engaging in a true dialogue with school personnel. I know we did surveys, and I know we did listening sessions. By truly engaging in a dialogue with school personnel, community at large, about the real changes occurring now and what may happen in the future. With not only our district's lower enrollment numbers, but also the issue with the legislature, who holds the purse strings, who actually predominantly funds our buildings. And the question still remains for me is why there were no major cuts made in 20, 21, 22, and we're making them in 23, which will impact the 24-25 budget. When enrollment was down, causing a loss in budgeted general fund dollars that include those precious weighted funds, even when knowing that ESSER dollars, ESSER funds, would only be available to temporarily help balance our shrinking revenue funds and streams. By informing the public early and often of this impending shortfall would have gone a long way to creating what I would call a common understanding and with the intent of garnering public consensus and support among our community stakeholders. Fast forward to today. The listening sessions and the public hearing held recently may have been designed to listen and document the statements. However, they were not designed to allow our stakeholders true input to be considered in the final solutions. When we invite the public to roll up their sleeves and actively work to help with the challenging task of right-sizing our district, for the students, which is the reason why we're all here, they would have a dramatically stronger academic outcomes and successes for their future, with all of us working collectively together. If school closures must occur, we have to prioritize making sure that the proper resources, for example, ESOL, social and emotional supports, transportation, should follow. And academic success must be paramount, a focus for the impacted students and the schools that they're moving to. We should not merge a low-performing school and its students with a low-performing, welcoming school. I'm not saying that that happens in every case, but it does happen. Right-sizing the district to appropriately meet changes in an urban district this size is inevitable. It absolutely is. And when it's done with a consensus that all stakeholders have a role and are valued, the opportunities are limitless. Talking about the most impacted person at the table, we didn't get a chance to really hear from them. That's because of who they are and the circumstances they find themselves in. So language, income, that's what I heard when I was in my listening sessions. Parents of special education students, parents of students that were newcomers, parents of students that do not necessarily have transportation to get to and from the new school. So when looking at the options that we have, my feeling is that I don't have enough information. Option 3 will be critical, and we don't have all of that information, as we've heard. It is forthcoming, but we're making a decision just banking on that's how we're going to balance this budget. And I don't think that's fair to the public. I believe the public should have this information now as we're making this decision. This is a drastic and could be a life-changing decision. We should have all of the options fully available, fully fleshed out, where you see and know where this district is going, so we can do that together. So having said that, I will be voting to not accept this proposal to close the district's 6 schools at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Melody. Diane?
Mr. President, do I have the option to ask a question to
Yes.
another board member?
Yeah, I think we're this far along. Go ahead.
Melody, what would your recommendation be then moving forward?
I think I've given it. We should have, if I were to be able to make the decision, it would be to delay this, where we have all of the options fully on the table. That would be my decision, or option.
Mr. President, I do have a statement that I'd like to read.
Go ahead.
Today we stand at a crossroads, faced with the decisions that are as difficult as they are necessary. Our commitment to the well-being and success of every student, every family, and every educator within our district remains unwavering. Yet we find ourselves navigating through challenges that demand tough choices and strategic insight. We know that there are no perfect solutions, there are only trade-offs. The decision to close schools is not one taken lightly, but is driven by the need to ensure that our educational offerings meet high standards within the realities of our budget. It is about focusing on what truly makes our educational community special, the relationships and connections that foster growth, learning, and support. Throughout our listening sessions, a powerful theme emerged. Time and time again, we heard moving stories about the profound impact staff has had on students' lives. These narratives went beyond the academic, touching on moments where a teacher's insight, a counselor's guidance, or an administrator's support change the course of a student's journey. It is clear that the heart of our school community beats through the dedication and compassion of our staff. Their ability to make a significant difference in someone's life underscores the essence of what we aim to preserve and strengthen, even as we face the necessity of school closures. As we move forward, let us carry these stories with us as a reminder of the transformative power of education and our educators' invaluable role in shaping futures. These stories inspire us and reinforce our commitment to ensuring that every student continues to have access to such impactful relationships, no matter where they learn. Our response to these challenges are aimed at addressing critical needs such as the teacher shortage, enrollment loss, deferred maintenance, the underutilization of buildings, and the efficient use of our resources. This is about more than immediate savings. It is about building a sustainable, adaptable future for our students, no matter their socioeconomic status. We are committed to turning challenges into opportunities, ensuring that our educational system emerges stronger, more focused, and more resilient. In closing, I want to directly address the parents, students, and staff members facing the prospect of their school closing. We understand the depth and feeling and the strong bonds that tie you to your school. It is more than a building. It is a home. It is a place of cherished memories and friendships. While this decision comes from a place of necessity, it does not lessen the emotional weight it carries for you. We are committed to supporting you through this transition. We can see this not as an ending, but as a beginning, and together we will navigate this path, honoring the legacy of our schools while embracing the opportunities ahead. Your strength and resilience are invaluable as we move forward, united in our commitment to the students' academic success.
Thank you, Diane. Did you want to? Diane?
With that, I move that we accept the recommendation before the Board of Education to approve Resolution 2024-1, closing schools to improve the school system of the district affecting the following schools: Hadley Middle School, Jardine STEM and Career Exploration Academy Magnet Middle School, Clark Elementary, Cleveland Traditional College and Career Readiness Magnet Elementary, Park Elementary School, and Payne Elementary School.
Stan, I had something to say.
We need a second first knock. Hang on one second.
I'll second.
It's moved by
I didn't get a chance to make my statement.
Let me just announce that there's a motion on the floor. It's been moved by Diane and seconded by Julie, and we will now have a round of discussion on the proposal or the motion. Knock.
Thank you, Stan. As a researcher, as an evaluator, as an educator, as a student, as above all a product of Wichita Public Schools, the son of refugees and immigrants, a kid who was on free and reduced lunch, a kid who was on ESOL, I can recognize the need to close schools with also recognizing that my principles of equity, true community oversight of our school district, true financial oversight of our school district has been violated. I, in good conscience, cannot vote for this package deal. I want all options on the table moving forward. I want our community, our classified staff, our teachers, especially our parents, especially our students, to have much greater say, much greater decision-making, much greater voice in our budget, and making sure that each and every dollar is accounted for. With that, I will be voting against the package deal.
Thank you, Knock. Julie?
This is obviously, for all of us, a very difficult decision, and voices that we've heard from parents has been very heartfelt, and we don't any of us take this lightly, no matter which side or position we fall on. I think no one wants to or likes to or would pick to close schools. They are important pieces in our neighborhood. They are places where our kids learn and where they do establish those connections and relationships with teachers and their other friends. It has been so honoring and so fulfilling to hear and to understand how much our teachers and our schools have impacted children. And we know that. We all know that. That's what we're about as Board of Education members, but to actually have our parents tell us and to know how deep that runs has been very honoring, as Melody stated. And so this is a difficult decision. However, on January 22nd, our Board of Education unanimously voted on and agreed to direct the administration to propose to us the closing of 1 to 6 schools based on the concerns that we had heard relative to budget, relative to enrollment decreasing, relative to our deferred maintenance needs, relative to our capacity issues. All of these things we heard back in January, and we as a board unanimously agreed that we wanted administration to bring to us a proposal of 4 to 6 schools. And we defined for them the direction relative to making those decisions. They worked hard and they took it seriously and with compassion also, and brought us a proposal. That proposal included direction that the board had given previously relative to honoring our staff with their continued raises, with keeping mental health supports in place as the community had told us they wanted us to do, and that was how the package was put together based on this board's direction. So although tonight is very painful, and we know that the people that we can care about and serve are going to experience grief because of their loss, I will vote in favor of the motion because I think it's the most equitable and wisest way possible in the constraints of time and budget for us to move forward. I do want to also just say thank you to the things that I've heard from staff and principals of welcoming schools about how eager they are to welcome their new students. And our staff, our teachers are dedicated and wonderful, and they will embrace your children at the new schools as you have been embraced where you are. I'm confident of that.
Thank you, Julie. We do have a motion on the floor and a second. Call the vote. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. We still have a screen that's down. And that was a, Joseph, that was a yes for, Patrick, that was a yes for Stan. Motion carries 5-2. Since that motion has passed, we will need to address the second recommendation, which is about approving the administration's final boundary proposals for effective August 1st, 2024. And Kelly, did you want to introduce that? Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Fabian, for being here tonight. Fabian's you've seen the maps if you were at the listening sessions, and you've seen most of this presentation, but we're going to go through it to allow for any feedback or comments from the board. Thank you, Fabian.
Well, good evening, President Reeser, Vice President Albert, Superintendent Bielefeld, and members of the board. This is part 2 of the recommendation. I do want to echo what has been said earlier. This process has been incredibly difficult for all of us, and none of these decisions were taken lightly. I will share that I am going to be going over numbers and impacting some of the changes. I think what made this incredibly difficult for all of us was the understanding and knowing that behind every number that we're sharing, there is a family, there is a face, there is a student. And that is the hardest part, just having that understanding that we could potentially be displacing some families. So as we move, I'm going to start with sharing a little bit of some of the considerations that we took into account when we looked at boundary changes. First was least disruption to the system. We wanted to, and based on your direction, we wanted to keep these changes as contained as possible for it to impact the 2,300 students or students that are living within those respective boundaries versus impacting the entire system. We didn't want to create the domino effect that often boundary changes place, which is moving one area to another, to another, to another. We wanted to minimize feeder pattern changes as much as possible, and we kept all of our high school's feeders intact. But we definitely wanted to keep students together as much as possible. Now, it didn't work out perfectly in every circumstance, especially when we think about a middle school, which is your middle of the feeder that is potentially closing, so that creates some disruptions. But as much as possible, we tried to keep that into account. We also looked at proximity in the schools around, and so again, making sure that that the schools around had enough capacity. And also we looked at enrollment projections. So we bulked all of the schools that were going to be feeder schools, looked at the projections that we were provided by MGT. We factored in an error factor based on the school year, and then moved from there. And then the last piece was we wanted to minimize students crossing major highways and roadways. Now, I will make very clear that there are students that are crossing major roadways throughout the city. Again, but we looked at if there are crossing major roadways, that there were pedestrian-controlled crosswalks or sidewalks. No different circumstances, for the most part, outside of a couple of exceptions, than what we have students doing every day throughout the city. So with that, we'll move forward with boundary changes as recommended tonight, and we're going to start with Clark Elementary. Clark Elementary, as you can tell, their boundary is that light brown at the top. Beach Elementary is right below that. And then to the west, southwest, you have Allen and you have Caldwell. So the way that the boundary was redrawn, and I will say these numbers are based on December of this year. I did a data pull from Synergy, and then what we did is we used Edulog, our scheduling software, to create planning areas within each one of these areas to double check the work and to make sure that the distribution of students balanced out and that we weren't putting the welcoming schools over capacity. And so there are 74 students that are living in the southwest portion of the Clark boundary. Those students would be reassigned to Allen. And so the Allen boundary then would become that area in the blue, absorbing that portion that is south of Lincoln and west of Governor. The next part is the northeast part of the current Clark boundary. There are about 70 students that reside within that boundary. Those 70 students would be reassigned to Beach. And so the Beach boundary then would become that light blue area. Then the final part of the Clark boundary is the northwest portion. There's about 57 students that reside in that boundary that would be reassigned to Caldwell. And so Caldwell would become what you see the area in the purple, and the light blue is Beach, and then Allen is right below that. So as we continue, we wanted to look at demographics. We know that you've had some questions about demographic impacts to these schools. And so we looked at what would happen if students made those choices directly. If all of the students that were that have the opportunity to go to Allen, Caldwell, and Beach, if they all went, what those school demographics would look like. The inner circle represents what their current enrollment is and what their demographics are. And as you can see, the medium blue is our American Indian or Alaskan Native population. Our orange represents our Asian population. Our gray is our Black or African American. Yellow is Hispanic. Light blue is Native Hawaiian. The lighter green is 2 or more races, and then your dark blue is white. And these were randomly assigned by Excel, just so you know the colors. But as we look, there were no really significant impacts as part of this change. Your most drastic move that we'll see is Caldwell Elementary. Their Hispanic population reduces from 40.1 to 36.9. So there wasn't any major impact in terms of the demographics of these particular buildings. The next school that we looked at was Cleveland Elementary. Now, Cleveland doesn't have a boundary. They are a pure magnet. So what we did with Cleveland is we looked at where the students that are currently attending Cleveland are coming from and what would happen if the school closed. And so as you can see, the biggest recipient, again, where these students choose to go back to their neighborhood school, they're going to have options to apply for other magnet schools. But if all students chose to go back to their neighborhood schools, Kelly would pick up 84 students. Next to that, Woodman would pick up 35, 32 for Gardner, 28 for Cessna, and 29 for White. Melody, you asked about our pre-K numbers at Cleveland earlier. There's approximately 19 students currently in their all-day pre-K program at Cleveland Elementary, as you can see. Park Elementary is the next one, and Park is a little complicated. And I will say that we took this opportunity for Park Elementary to correct some boundaries that were kind of erroneous in the past. If you look at the portion south of Kellogg, currently assigned to Washington Elementary, there are 2 areas. The first one is this area south of Kellogg to the west side. There's approximately 26 students that reside there that currently are having to walk under the underpass of Kellogg to get to Washington Elementary. This was an opportunity for us to get them closer to their base school. Harry Street has a little bit of space, and so these 26 students would experience a boundary change, and so they would be reassigned to Harry Street, which puts them closer to Harry Street Elementary, or so it puts them closer to their base school, as well as they don't have to walk Kellogg anymore. So their walk path is closer than what it is. So we are kind of fixing some wonky boundary pieces that were done previously. The next area, also south of Kellogg, that is assigned to Washington. The recommendation is those 51 students that are living in the eastern portion of that to be reassigned to Linwood. And so those 51 students would now become part of the Linwood boundary. The other thing that this move does is it cleans up feeder patterns. Washington Elementary currently has 3 feeder patterns. So Harry Street already feeds to Hamilton, so all of those students would remain together. And that portion, that eastern portion, feeds to Meade already, so all of the Linwood students now would go together to Meade. So it combines and it cleans up a little bit of that feeder pattern. The current Park Elementary boundary, and again, it encompasses a lot of downtown. This is a special circumstance, and we use 9th Street as a divider for the new boundary. Now, we understand, and we've heard from a lot of the listening sessions about concerns in terms of the neighborhood, about the walk path to school as we looked at some of this. We are looking at transportation options for this particular community and this particular boundary change. There are a lot of shelters that reside within the current park boundary. Some of them are going to fall under the Washington boundary, the new Washington boundary. or the proposed Washington boundary, and some of them are going to fall under the Irving boundary. But we are looking, and as Susan mentioned, even some McKinney-Vento options for us to be able to provide transportation to these students, to some of those students. So there are 91 students that currently live south of 9th Street. The recommendation then is for those 91 students to be reassigned and attend Washington Elementary. And so the Washington Elementary boundary would expand to what you see in the blue. Now, it looks like a really, really big boundary, but again, it encompasses a lot of downtown and a lot of the downtown portion. There are no students with registered addresses that are living, WPS students that are currently at Park. Again, there are some shelter students, yes, but again, as far as any residential students, there are none. So although the boundary looks really big, really, it's not until you get south of Central that you get north of Central that you start seeing students in that area. The next portion is the northern portion, the portion, again, north of 9th Street, south of 13th. And there's approximately 110 students that currently reside in that area. It is a very, very dense area. Those students would be reassigned from currently Park and would now attend Irving Elementary. So they would head north of that. As you look at the demographic shifts, you see Park, which is a smaller wheel in the left. That is their current demographics as you see them. And then you see the impact that this change does to their ethnicity. Again, the biggest shift that we're seeing would be Irving Elementary. Irving right now is 87.1% Hispanic, and that number would go down to 83.3%. So they do have a minor drop in their Hispanic population, approximately a 3.8 reduction in their Hispanic population, but that is the most drastic impact from a demographic standpoint that you would see to this particular area. The next boundary change would be Payne Elementary. Payne Elementary was unique as we were looking at it, simply because, again, there was going to be some impact there, and we wanted to make sure to leave some room for the Cleveland closure if some of those families chose to go back. As you saw those numbers, Woodman would be a high recipient of that, Kelly would be a high recipient of that, and because of that, we wanted to be careful. Now, this particular portion is west of Southwest Boulevard. As I mentioned, when we draw boundaries, we try to keep natural barriers. Kellogg is one that we try to keep. But this area, because of the railroad tracks in Southwest Boulevard, all of those students in the area in the red are currently being transported to Payne. It is an area that qualifies for hazardous based on policy, and because of that, we knew that regardless of what school we assigned them to, we were going to transport them. And so in order for us to leave room and minimize impact to the system, we decided, and we looked at Lawrence. Lawrence had room north of Kellogg. Since we're already busing them, Lawrence kind of made the natural fit for that. Again, students are not going to have to walk. This is an area that would qualify for transportation regardless, and so the students would be transported to Lawrence. The next portion is the northeast portion of the current Payne boundary. There's about 60 students that reside there that would be reassigned to Stanley Elementary. And then the south central portion of the current Payne boundary, then there's about 68 students as of December, again, that resided in that area that would be reassigned to Woodman. So the boundaries as an impact from Payne would be, Lawrence would be that wonky purple, and I know that it looks wonky, but again, a large portion of those students are already being transported. Then your light blue would be Stanley, and Woodman would encompass all of the yellow. When you look at the demographic impact from this particular proposed boundary change, the largest impact would happen at Lawrence Elementary. And Lawrence Elementary, again, in the Hispanic population, you would see a decrease of 3.4% in the Hispanic population. So they would drop from 48.6 to 45.1%. That is really the large. All of the other moves are smaller, or impact are smaller, as you can see. Then we get to middle school. And middle school was a little bit more complicated with the closure of Hadley. We knew that we were going to have to impact more boundaries because of that. And there was a little bit of a domino effect as a part of this one. In order for us to get the distribution of students to be a little bit more acceptable and for us not to worry about potentially overcrowding buildings. And so as we looked at Hadley Middle School, the first piece we took is we looked at current areas that are assigned to Marshall, because we knew that Pleasant Valley Middle School had room. And so there currently McLean Elementary is assigned to Marshall Middle School, and the eastern portion of the OK boundary is also assigned to Marshall. And so under this proposal, we're recommending a boundary change for those students, and for those students to then be reassigned to Pleasant Valley Middle School. And I'll talk about what options we're giving those boundary change families, because their options are a little bit different here in a bit. And then the last portion is Black Elementary. Again, we try to keep feeder patterns intact. And so Black Elementary currently feeds to Hadley. The recommendation would be for those students to now go to Pleasant Valley Middle School. So in total, there's about 158 students that would be reassigned to attend Pleasant Valley Middle School. So the Pleasant Valley Middle School boundary would encompass all of the purple that you currently see in the map. Next, we looked at two different areas. We looked at Lawrence and Franklin Elementary. Lawrence currently feeds to Hadley, and Franklin is a split feeder currently. There is the northwest portion of the Franklin boundary that currently goes to Hadley. The remainder of the Franklin boundary feeds to Hamilton. And then there's the downtown area of Park Elementary, and then there's 29 students in the Hamilton boundary. There's no students that are living downtown. So all in all, again, there's 113 students that would move from Hadley to Marshall, and then there would be another 29 students that would move from Hamilton to Marshall. So the Marshall would encompass all of the area in the green at that point. And then as we looked, then Dodge is currently a split feeder for high school, even though it all goes to Hadley. So we felt that split high school feeder we could utilize for middle school. And so there's 84 students that live in the southern portion of the Dodge boundary. And so those 84 students would be reassigned to Hamilton Middle School, and so Hamilton would become that area in the yellow. And then there is the western portion of the OK boundary that currently feeds to Hadley, as well as the northern portion of the Dodge boundary. There's about 82 students there, and those students would then be reassigned to Wilbur Middle School. So the boundary change then, all Wilbur would encompass all of the blue. Pleasant Valley Middle School would encompass the purple. Marshall would take the green, and then Hamilton would encompass all of the yellow. Again, our middle school boundaries, because they're larger, they encompass a larger footprint. So we do see a little bit more transportation, but we did do a transportation analysis in regards to this, and the savings of the closure offset some of the potential increases as a part of it. So it would become a wash. There would be no increases from a transportation standpoint following the 2.5 mile rule. There is your demographic impact as a result of the recommended boundary change. Pleasant Valley Middle School would be the school that would see the most drastic change, and they would experience a decrease, actually, of the Hispanic population again. They're currently 74.6 Hispanic. They would go down to 68.1. Marshall Middle School, too, would see a 5% decline in their Hispanic population, so they would go from 68.7 Hispanic down to 63.8 Hispanic. So that is the biggest impact from a demographic standpoint. And Pleasant Valley Middle School is, in terms of all of the impact that we're seeing from a demographic standpoint, based on all of these changes, it is the biggest change, and it is that 6.6%. And then Jardine is the last one. Jardine Middle School is unique that it only has 2 feeders. So there's about 190 students that reside currently in the Jardine boundary. The bulk of them are from Colvin Elementary, and then there are a few students. Griffith Elementary is a split feeder currently, and so there are some students currently that also are assigned to Jardine. So all of these students would be reassigned from Jardine to Meade, and so the Meade boundary would become all of the area in the purple. Again, both Jardine and Meade feed to east. So this is one that, again, there would be no, really, they all feed in the same manner, so they would all be assigned to east. There would be no major changes from that angle. The other piece is, in regards to this particular change, we do utilize transit to transport all of the East High students that attend from the Jardine boundary. So from that area of Plainview, currently, there are buses that travel down Ross Parkway and public transportation buses that take students to East High School. And so we've been in conversations with the city about providing a similar service to our Meade Middle School students. Buses already travel down Hillside, and so we're working with the city to make that change and hopefully provide transportation to those students living in the Plainview area that would now be reassigned to Meade. So as we look at the demographic change for as impact from this boundary change, then again, it would be Meade Middle School would increase their Hispanic population by 5.4%. That is the biggest impact, the biggest demographic that would be impacted at Meade Middle School as a result of this recommendation. As we talk about options for students, the first is for neighborhood students that are attending closing buildings. This would impact the students at Clark, students at Hadley, at Park, at Payne, and all of the 190 Jardine students that reside in the neighborhood. So their first option would be to attend their new neighborhood school. They would be guaranteed enrollment there. Transportation, if students live 2.5 miles or more, again, with a couple of exceptions that I mentioned with Park and Jardine. They could apply to a magnet school. Acceptance is based on the magnet lottery. Applications are due by March 22nd, and transportation, again, would be provided if they live 2.5 miles or more from the magnet school they select. Or they could request a special transfer pending approval from the administrative office. Applications are due April 8th, and as part of our special transfer policy, no transportation would be provided. Options for magnet students currently attending a closing magnet. So these would be the 190 or so, because there's about 190 current magnet students at Jardine, as well as the Cleveland students. Their options are apply to another magnet. Students will receive priority placement in the lottery, which again increases the odds, but it does not guarantee enrollment. Applications are due by March 22nd. Transportation, if the students live 2.5 miles or more from the selected magnet school. They could attend their address-assigned neighborhood school. They're guaranteed enrollment there. Again, transportation if they live 2.5 miles or more. Or they could request a special transfer to another neighborhood school, pending approval from the administrative offices. Applications are due by April 8th and no transportation. The last category of students are students that are impacted by boundary changes. As I mentioned, there are students from the Washington Elementary boundary, those students south of Kellogg that would be now have the option to go to Harry Street or Linwood, as well as the current Marshall students that would be reassigned to PV Middle, and the Hamilton students that would be reassigned to Marshall. So these students, as we've operated in the past from boundary changes, there's always been a desire by the Board of Education to offer grandfathering. And so the intent is for us to offer grandfathering to these students since their schools are not closing. And so as a part of this, first, these students impacted by this, and there's about 160 students in total, they would be guaranteed enrollment at their new neighborhood school. So if they want to go to their new neighborhood school, in a lot of instances that's closer to their home, they can attend, and they're guaranteed enrollment. Transportation will be provided if it's 2.5 miles or more. They can remain at the current school, so if they're attending Washington Elementary, and those Washington students are currently not being transported, so they could remain at Washington through the remainder of their K-5 career. Middle school students would be able to remain at Marshall or at Hamilton through the remainder of their 6A career. No transportation would be provided as a part of that. They could apply to another magnet. Again, acceptance will be based on the magnet lottery. Applications would be due by March 22nd, and transportation would be provided if they live 2.5 miles or more from the school. Or they could request a special transfer to another neighborhood school pending administrative approval. Applications are due by April 8, and no transportation would be provided. So those are the three kind of major categories of students. I will say there are some special transfer students that have special transferred into those buildings. Those students are also going to receive letters later in the week, and they have the option to return to their neighborhood school, or they could also request special transfers elsewhere or also apply for magnets. Now, we talked a lot about special programming and special programming tied to these particular buildings. First, ESOL newcomers. I know that that's been a lot of conversation around that. The Park Elementary program will relocate to Cloud Elementary, serving the portion of the city. The Jardine program would relocate to Coleman Middle School. Newcomer students at those closing sites will be relocated to programs closer to their home. As we talked to those families, we know that a lot of those families often don't have transportation, so being closer to home is going to be more important. And as we're moving a program really from one extreme to the other, as you think about the Jardine from the south side of the city to the north side of the city, we wanted to provide those opportunities to be closer to home. Families will receive school assignment letters by April. Now, special education programming, so those students that are attending categorical programming at some of these schools, we are going to follow the traditional annual placement program. Those families are notified every April of what their school assignments are, and we will follow that same process and notify them what those assignments are by April. Other special program students, pre-K relocations, as mentioned earlier, they're still under analysis, so we're still looking at where we're going to relocate some of those programs. We are looking at some of the interests in some of those areas, some of those high areas where there's high interest, so that way we can make sure that those relocations happen where they're needed. And then also McKinney-Vento options are going to be based on a variety of factors. Again, those are very individualized student placements, and so those families will be provided the appropriate options also. So just know that those are coming. I wanted to talk a little bit about the feedback from the listening sessions. Not only from the sticky notes that were provided, which were not very many, but also from all of the feedback in general that was provided as part of the listening sessions. Really, kind of four major things stood out as part of the listening session feedback that we received. The first one was feeder patterns related to the Hadley closure. As we think about the students from the Hadley boundary that we're reassigning to Wilbur currently feeds to Northwest only. And so that split feeder and those students going to Wilbur, and it happens now. There are students that go to one middle school and go to a different high school. But there were concerns related to that. And I think that there is an opportunity for us in the future to look at those feeder patterns and look at what those high school assignments look like for us to kind of revisit that as those students kind of work through the system. Transportation was a major piece that came out. Walk to school distance and bus needs. Again, those to me are tied closely together. And as I spoke about Park Elementary and about Jardine Middle School, those are definitely high needs areas that we're looking at and providing some sort of transportation via McKinney-Vento or other avenues. We also brought in both the proposed closing and the proposed welcoming schools. We met with them in joint sessions. We walked them through the boundaries. They know the maps better than we do. They know the topography. They know their neighborhoods better than we do. We wanted to give them an opportunity to provide us feedback in terms of any major concerns that they had too. So we did do that, and we gathered their feedback, and we took that into account. We took all of that feedback together before submitting this final proposal to you all. I also wanted to talk a little bit about transportation, because I think transportation is heavy on everybody's mind right now. Policy 7300 is the one that dictates transportation and who qualifies for transportation. The primary pieces that policy highlights is distance. That's the 2.5 mile distance. That, again, is based on the reimbursement that we receive from the state. The state reimburses us for 2.5 miles or more. for students in transportation. Special education is obviously one that we provide transportation for that is even under 2.5 miles if the student has transportation as a related service on their IEP. There is the hazardous transportation policy that also designate areas based on hazardous that is based on walk to school. And there is a criteria, a 4-prong criteria that comes as a part of that. Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, there are some provisions there for transportation. There's also McKinney-Vento and Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. That is our foster care students that we are required to transport to their school of origin. So those are the reasons why we provide transportation, and we're looking at those at an individualized basis as we look at students and their reassignments. I also wanted to clarify that even though there were 46,230 students as of the day before yesterday when we pulled this data from our transportation, we're only transporting 17,420. So there are almost 63% of our student population that currently does not qualify or receive transportation. The other part that I wanted to clarify is there are currently a little bit over 6,000 students that reside 1.5 miles to 2.5 miles from their current school that also do not get transportation. Students throughout our city are walking to school or in different scenarios from that 1.5 to a 2.5 mile distance. And again, it isn't just based on a particular area, it happens throughout our city. Key and important dates to note, and we wanted to highlight these dates for our families and impacted families. First, school assignment options for students. This is a part 2 of the letters that we previously sent. Will be mailed by March 8th, by this Friday. Tomorrow morning, we'll be doing a poll of impacted families, and we'll be notifying families of their options, all of the options that I went through just a little bit ago. We are going to be doing an electronic intent form that we are going to be making available to families. We want families to tell us what options they are wanting to take advantage of, partially so that we can look at some planning. A lot of this is going to impact staffing and has a domino effect. And so as much as we can know what choices families are planning to make, then it allows us to be better prepared and to better serve them in terms of the options that they have. A magnet application deadline is due March 22nd, so we align both the magnet deadline with the intent form. So families, those are due March 22nd. Our special transfer for impacted families is due April 8th too. So those families that are seeking a special transfer to a different neighborhood school, April 8th would be the deadline for that. And again, they can find more information at usd259.org/transform24. The last piece that I wanted to highlight is our Transform 24 Parent Support Center remains open and will continue to remain open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Families can call 368-8008 to receive information. Again, or they can email, or they can also look at our website. We do have a Spanish-speaking member that is part of that Transform 24 team, as well as our multilingual education services also has a parent support line for different languages too, and so we utilize those to provide family information. Again, as much as families have questions, we are trying to be as responsive as possible, and so we encourage families to please take advantage of those options.
And I would just throw in, as much as we heard tonight about the support that our schools offer our families, that's not going to stop tomorrow morning, right? Tomorrow morning, those schools will be wrapping their arms around those kids. They'll be answering magnet questions for parents, helping them navigate kind of what comes next. Our schools and our principals are ready for that, and I think have some really good ideas for how to make a hard thing better, or provide some hope in the next stage or whatever that looks like. So with that, I think any questions, Stan, we're ready for.
Julie.
when we got feedback from parents and listening sessions and stuff, the transportation concerns that I heard most often, you've addressed in your presentation. Park, you think we're going to be able to solve some of those transportation concerns either based on the hazardous policy or even some maybe potentially from the McKinney-Vento policy. So you've addressed Park in my mind. You've addressed Jardine also. That was the other one that I heard a lot of concerns about transportation. And we have the city buses that will be able to pick kids up and take them to Meade. Now, will they be provided a free bus ticket like we gave for the Southeast kids in the AMAC neighborhood to get to Southeast when we had that transportation concern? Excuse me.
And that is, we will operate them in the same way. Again, all of our students that ride public transit receive their bus cards. And the nice part about that particular service is it's not just for school, to and home school. Students have access to the transit system whenever. And so again, it in many ways that opens the door. And really it's a benefit to our community to also develop riders, bus riders, transit riders that understand how to operate the system too. So again, that is the intent, is for them to receive those bus passes that they're able to use whenever.
Now, with your listening to parents, I mean, clearly you made some changes and addressed some of their concerns. Was there anything that caused you to modify any of your proposed boundaries or any of those other things? Or was it mostly these transportation issues?
It was mainly these transportation issues. I did look at Park because of some of the shelter concerns that we received. And I actually looked at other options in terms of how we could redistribute Park, even looked at kind of surrounding schools. But again, as we looked at where it made sense, where we had the rooms, this is where we have the room. And so again, because of that, I've been talking to transportation and really kind of looking at what options we have from that avenue for this particular situation.
Thank you.
Kathy?
You know this by heart. I mean, I saw you rambling off without looking at your notes. You probably dream about boundaries now, don't you?
Pretty much.
So I do have a question. I have several questions. As far as the transit bus and the students given a card that they can use, let's say you've got mom who is sending her second grader to a brand new school and has to use a transit. Does mom also get a pass to accompany the student to school?
We are currently not using transit. The only transit bus that we have at the elementary level is strictly volunteer.
Okay.
And so again, we haven't delved. There is a bus that serves currently Minnehaha, some of the apartments that are on Rock Road. But again, we don't provide bus passes for those particular students because it's within the 2.5 mile boundary.
I
So those families
misunderstood
do
you.
that
I'm
themselves.
sorry. Okay. Did you say that Payne was hazardous? Or was it was Park, but not, you
No.
said something different about Payne.
Payne is, there's a portion of Payne, the western part of Southwest Boulevard, that is currently hazardous. So let me go back.
You just tell me, because I can't read maps.
It is that area in the red right there. So all of that area in the red, because of Southwest Boulevard,
Yes.
those students would have to cross railroad tracks, and
Right.
railroad tracks is one of the criteria for hazardous busing.
Okay.
And if you think about it, that area is very industrial, but there are some residential pieces to the southern part of that, as well as to the western portion of it. And so those students receive transportation
Okay,
because of that.
not all of the students,
No, just this
just the
particular-
ones that are past the railroad tracks.
Mhm.
Okay, I have more questions here. Sorry, let me find them. I have them down here. I have my finger on them. Oh, here they are, of course, right here. How much does the transit cards cost the district?
I believe they're $80 a year, if I remember clearly.
Per student?
Yeah, but you'll have to, I believe it's $80 a year or a semester. I'll double check with Lisa
And
on
how
that.
many students are we currently offering that to? Do you know
I
offhand?
do not know.
But you'll
offhand.
find out for me, right?
I will.
Okay.
And I will tell you, it's much more cost effective than our yellow buses.
I know
It
it
is
is. I
much
just
more
want to know.
cost-effective,
And
yes.
as far as on slide number 44 with the school options for neighborhood students attending a closing school, are we putting these students at the top? I think this was said in one of our sessions, but I need a refresher. At the top of the list, priority, they get first pick?
As far as magnet,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Well, not, yeah, they have a set criteria, but it's high up there.
Okay, and then the next page, under the request a special transfer to another neighborhood, is that a first come, first serve, or our students that are being impacted get to have high priority with special transfers? Does that make sense? I'm not making sense, am I?
That's a good question.
Okay. I mean,
Right now, the answer would be no. We haven't
Yeah.
talked about that.
well, I just think because of the inconvenience of these families and these students, it would be nice if we could put them at the top of the list for special transfers before those that are not being impacted decide, oh, I want my son to go over here, not here. So I just wondered if administration would be able to consider that and let me know.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that.
And I think, okay. I do have a question for the president. Because our transportation, we're going to have some exceptions to these boundary changes, are we going to need to amend the policy to reflect that?
I do not believe we will, but if a circumstance is brought to my attention from legal or the superintendent's office or even a board member, we will definitely address that.
Okay, I wish we could. I mean, is that a
Okay.
special request I need to put in, or is that something that we can just
No,
talk
I just
about
think
at the next
I
one?
think that's going to be the ongoing process.
Okay.
Because if we run up across something that says, "Oh, this is a direct violation of our policy," then we'll definitely be bringing it to the board.
Okay, and I think I just want to say,
Is that-
thank you for taking this so seriously. As you know, I've gone to you several times about reassure me that transportation is going to be really looked at, because that was important to me, because I had to take my son to McLean, where he was able to take the bus to Kellogg. So that's what happened. But anyway, so thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, I think transportation definitely came up in those listening sessions, and we're not gonna. It won't stop tonight. It'll be ongoing. Diane.
Fabian, thank you for the presentation, and you guys have given a recommendation to the board, so I move that we accept the administration's recommendation for the final boundary proposal effective August 1st, 2024. The recommended proposal includes boundary adjustments for 5 middle schools: Hamilton, Marshall, Meade, Pleasant Valley, Wilbur, and 10 elementary schools: Allen, Beach, Caldwell, Harry Street, Irving, Lawrence, Linwood, Stanley, Washington, and Woodman.
Is there a second?
I move that the board approve the administration's final boundary proposal effective August 1st, 2024.
I second it.
Been moved by Diane, seconded by Kathy. Motion carries 6-0. Patrick, next item, please.
Next item, under Education, Future Ready Centers, Manufacturing, and Healthcare Report.
Go ahead.
All right. We heard feedback tonight from one of the public comments that we haven't been talking about academics lately. So even though it is 10:50, we're going to have a...
We're going to power through this.
Yes, we are. The timing of this is somewhat important because of the opportunity we have to promote enrollment in this with our future juniors and seniors heading in next year. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Mr. Tim Hamlin. It should, if the light is blue, you should be good to go.
Well, okay. I'm not real sure if the traditional good evening still applies.
That's true.
Yes, good morning. Yes, there you go. Tim Hamlin, Executive Director of College and Career Readiness. Do want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about, earlier you mentioned the silver lining. Obviously a very difficult evening, but as I thought about that phrase, opportunity is truly the silver lining here. And every one of our students, regardless of where they now are going to go, will have the opportunity to experience the model that you're going to hear about this evening. Obviously, career and technical education is near and dear to my heart and huge. So at this time, I'm going to introduce Eric Shipman. He is our principal for the Future Ready Centers, and he's going to kind of take you through some information, update on that. So Eric, please take it away.
President Reeser, Vice President Albert, Superintendent Bielefeld, and board members, thank you for the opportunity to update you on our Future Ready Center programs. I've always started these off with a very brief introduction to the program, and anytime I have an audience, that's what we've done. As I know, we have some new board members who maybe don't have the full background on our programs either. There are currently 2 Future Ready Center programs that we operate with partnerships with WSU Tech. One in manufacturing, located next to North High School, 1435 Waco, and one on East Harry, which is actually inside of WSU Tech. We have our own entrance on the back side of those. The benefit to these programs is that we provide on-site, hands-on training and learning opportunities, along with mentoring from industry experts in high-need industry jobs. And so obviously both healthcare and manufacturing fit that. Students it's 100% free. There's no additional cost for students. It's been open to all Wichita Public Schools juniors and seniors. Transportation is provided. And that includes free college credit, work-based learning internships, and we accept students every fall and spring semester. One of the key points that we try to, when we talk with students about this opportunity, is we make sure to mention that there isn't a special transfer required. Unlike a lot of our CTE programs that do require special transfers, the Future Ready Centers do not. We make sure that that's important for students. What I classify a silly high school problem, which is I want to play this sport or this activity at the high school that I currently go to, East High or West High or whatever, or my friends go to school there and I'm not going to special transfer to another school. So those are the silly high school problems on why a student might not special transfer. But more realistic problems, I don't have a way to get there because in special transfers we don't provide transportation. And so if I wanted to do a program at West High School and I didn't live there and don't have a way to get there, then I don't have the ability to get to that school. And so that's a real problem. And that's not an equitable, that's an equity problem for me. And so the Future Ready Center, we tackle that barrier and remove that obstacle for students. So regardless if you have a way to get to the Future Ready Centers or not, we're going to provide you with free transportations for that. Just an example student schedule, because sometimes it's confusing that we show students, is on there. Ultimately, they're going to spend 2 of their 4 blocks. At most of our high schools, we're under the block scheduling. 2 of their 4 blocks. They give up 2 elective class periods, in other words, to be part of the Future Ready Center. The benefits, some of the benefits we talk to students about is building your resume. Regardless if you're going to college or if you are a student that is ready to enter the workforce after high school, we talk about the problem that most high school students have is what do you list on your resume? And at the Future Ready Center, we provide not just workplace credentials and certifications, but also technical level certifications from WSU Tech. So if a student would attend for 4 semesters at the Manufacturing Future Ready Center, they have the opportunity to earn 2 different technical certificates, one in manufacturing production, one in manufacturing technology. At the Healthcare Future Ready Center, they can earn a technical certificate in patient care technician or a technical certificate in emergency medical services. Just to clarify, with that, there's some math elective students that they have to have from their base high school. They can either score high enough on a math test that WSU Tech would administer. Their ACT score can also work there, or their score in a math course from their high school, depending on that. But they, in other words, are going to graduate from WSU Tech really the week before, typically, that they graduate from their high school. Also then, both Future Ready Centers have workplace credentials. So for example, in our manufacturing Future Ready Center, and this is on the slide, students in their first semester, I believe we're up to 15 workplace credentials in that first semester they're going to earn. Most of those are NC3 certifications, and those are national certifications that are recognized by industries throughout the country. The other major one is OSHA 10, which is a national safety certification that students earn. During that also, ideally we have in there, they're enrolled a minimum of 3 semesters. We really like them to be there for all 4 semesters. We have a lot of students that have decided their senior year, second semester to what I refer to as double up. And so they're enrolled at the FRC for 2 classes, and then they're also doing work-based learning at the same time. So they have an internship for part of their day. Obviously, seniors have a lot of flexibility in their schedules, especially second semester. With that, once students in their first semester, they're in what we call an introduction or core, where we introduce them. We really have stressed that students can be successful regardless of their background in both manufacturing and healthcare. So we have some recommended courses that we'd like for you to take your freshman and sophomore year, but they're not requirements. The 3 qualifications for the Future Ready Center is that you're a student in good standing. Really, we talk about not having suspensions and detentions and things of that nature, but that's a subjective term that we've worked with counselors and principals to talk about, that your attendance is in good standing, you're not truant, and that you're on track to graduate. And we've also kind of said that, you know, if you had 1 or 2 classes that you're needing to make up, that's probably different than, as long as there's a plan available that we can get you on track to graduate for sure. Once they're there, after their first semester, they enter in the manufacturing pathway into one of 3 basic courses. They're going to spend 2 semesters in that. Our first one is in aviation. That really involves sheet metal and composites. Production and assembly is a second pathway, and that really is involving 3D printing, CNC work, and some basic maintenance in manufacturing. The final one is maintenance and automation. I'll pause on that one just a minute. We're the only high school program in the state of Kansas that offers this to the depth that we do. In fact, KSD doesn't have a current pathway for automation. We'll brag a little bit. They came to us to figure it out. And so they came down and really dug deep with WSU Tech and our instructors at the Future Ready Center to figure out what classes they need to offer and could offer. Automation, again, deals with a lot with robotics and power and how we work with that. I had a comment from an unnamed individual at an event I was at that said, well, you're preparing kids for jobs in manufacturing, aren't those being replaced by robots? And my answer was, we sure hope so, because we're training kids to run them. And so if they're not, we are going to have problems. So healthcare, similarly, we have some introduction and core classes. We have realigned this with WSU Tech throughout the school year. We're going to start with there's 2 core semesters or 2 introduction semesters. We do allow students that have had some backgrounds in medical with healthcare or advanced science courses to move quicker through this, or if you're entering as your senior year. We'll start with Medicals Essentials. It's a high school level course. I guess I didn't mention that too. We do have one high school teacher that's employed by 259 at each one of the facilities. The rest of our instructors at the FRC are WSU Tech employees. That one teacher at each facility also serves as a homeroom teacher, where they kind of check on attendance, make sure we update on grades, and report back to the base high schools as we need. The first semester, medical essentials, medical terminology. The second semester, they'd be with us. Biology 1 at the college level, principles in nutrition, and first aid and CPR. Again, the idea is that almost all healthcare providers need these basic knowledge courses to be successful. We've also seen the healthcare classes can be just a bit more rigorous academically, and so we need to make sure that the students have a little bit stronger base in there. The 3 pathways really at the FRC Healthcare are a patient care technician pathway, an emergency medical technician pathway. We also built a custom pathway if we knew students were seeking a more professional career, if we could do that for them. And that's really to get them some prerequisites so that they could leave our program at the Future Ready Center and enter WSU Tech's licensed practitioner nurse program right away. In part of the patient care technician program, there is a number of certifications in that are listed on there. but mostly it is CNA, home health aide, EKG technician, and phlebotomy technicians are the major components of that PCT track. EMT obviously is its own pathway. Some of our EMT students then later will move on and move into phlebotomy or EKG, which is also very beneficial for someone who wants to be an EMT. Kind of our enrollment numbers historically. This was from last year. Throughout the year, this is both semesters combined, we served 91 students at our healthcare FRC, and you can see the high schools that they came from. Mostly it came from 2 high schools at the healthcare. It came from North High School and West High School. In manufacturing, we served 82 students throughout the semester. And again, some students came both semesters in those. Some came one semester, maybe, and then didn't come back in the spring or came to us in the spring. So there wasn't probably 82 students at either, or 91 students at the healthcare FRC all at the same time. But again, you can see that the majority of the students last year came from North High School at the manufacturing, which is located obviously right next door. The fall of this school year, we had 81 students that came to us from the healthcare FRC, a little bit more of a blend, but still probably still heavily dominated by North High and West High. And then manufacturing, again, 75 students that started with us in August, with 62 of them coming from North High School. This spring, so starting in January, we increased to 135 students. You can see there is a unique, and 103 students at manufacturing. We have some underrepresentation problems with male students at the healthcare FRC, and the opposite problem is female students in the manufacturing FRC. But the thing that I will point out is just especially at the healthcare FRC right now, is the breakdown by base high school, which we have increased significantly throughout the district. And then again, not quite as high in manufacturing, but some significant spots there when we get there. I don't have the slide on here, but I do have numbers for expected enrollments for next year. We've been working throughout the winter months to do that. We're anticipating, right now we've had 200 students that have applied or expressed interest in our healthcare FRC. That comes from all 8 of our high schools, 7 traditional high schools. You'll see a significant increase at East High this next year with some numbers. There will be 38 planned returners to the healthcare FRC, so our total number should be around 240 is what we're planning on. That will be at capacity. So we can't, with our current staff that we have, we won't be able to continue to grow that, and we may actually, I'll need to talk with WSU Tech, we may need to reduce that number, because the last thing we want to do is bring kids in for an introduction class and then not be able to serve them to get to a certification. So we may actually need to wait list a number of our students, and we've told them that as we've introduced that to them. So at the manufacturing FRC, we're planning on, right now we have 80 students that have applied. And again, that comes throughout all the district, with 68 students that we plan on returning. So we should be right around 150 students. We still have around 70 open spots there that we could find students with. We do have plans for that as well that we can talk through with you here in our next steps in a slide or two. Just some fast examples of success, and I did ask Martin if I could share his name. I've been bragging about this young man all over the district. Martin Gutierrez is a North High graduate, so he finished his credits in December. He was actually interested in a Textron internship. We had Textron there, and he was interested in the internship because he wanted to take sheet metal this semester with us at the FRC, and he was inquiring if that was possible, even though he graduated early. I said, well, Martin, let me figure that out for you. But before I could get that out, the Textron people that were there, their K-12 engagement specialist, said, why would you want to work as an intern? We'll hire you. We'll teach you sheet metal ourselves. So I asked Martin, I kind of, he's still 18, so I had to text him back and forth to get this information because he wouldn't, I tried to call him and he didn't answer the phone, but we texted back and forth, and Martin said, I asked questions like, hey, how did the Future Ready Center prepare you? And he said I wouldn't have had the his response was he would not have had the confidence to apply if he didn't have the skills that we had taught him. And so it was a pretty big moment for us. One of the fun parts when you're in my position sometimes is Martin said, "Do you think I should ask him about the salary?" And I said, "You absolutely need to ask those questions." So we talked about important questions to ask for when you're accepting a job. And so Martin is making around $24 an hour right now as an 18-year-old living at home, and he's excited about all the things that he can do. I asked, "Can I share that, Martin?" And he goes, "Yeah, everyone needs to know." So he was really excited. We do have a number of other students. We have around a half dozen students right now with internships from the manufacturing FRC with local companies, some of them Textron. I know Mrs. Albert shared with me, and her husband too, if you didn't know, he works at Textron, and one of our students works closely. Again, I haven't got the permission from the student to share her name, but she does work. He works closely there and is having a great experience as well. So it's a really fun thing for us to do. At healthcare, our internship program looks a little bit different. The healthcare industry isn't quite. It's more job shadowing. We do a number of job shadowing days, and so we've done that at the healthcare FRC, but there's not companies that are ready to take on, maybe like in manufacturing, a high school kid for an entire semester. They want it more day to day with still great experiences. One of our big brags there is we were at 92% average rate on our healthcare certification tests, and that's on the first attempt. So almost all of our students are passing the very first attempt. Some progress. We established goals at the FRC this fall when we got together. One of them was really the first goal was to build collective efficacy across the district. One of the things that I was pretty sure needed to happen, and I think been reassured with that, was that this program needed to be not CTEs. It didn't need to be a Future Ready Center program. It needed to be a Wichita Public School program. And we needed lots of counselors and teachers and principals and parents to understand that this program is here to benefit not just Wichita Public Schools, but the Wichita greater community, and that together we can make this work. But the idea was that to increase enrollment, because we've increased collective efficacy. Really our goal in the fall, which when I talked with our teachers about it, Mrs. Robinson in healthcare told me today, she goes, I thought you were crazy. She said, when you said you wanted to have 200 students by next fall, I thought you were crazy. And she said today, I can't believe we're going to have to turn people away. And I was like, well, I didn't either, but we put out a pretty audacious goal. We've got some work to do to get to manufacturing there, but we've got plans in the next few days too. Our second goal was to just identify if we're being successful. And so we needed to find some lag measures, some post-secondary measures. We're still working on how we're going to absolutely track that down, because ultimately we want to know if we're working, so we can do some qualitative things like talk to Textron, talk to Spirit, talk to some of our industry partners, and ask them, Wesley, via Christie Ascension, to ask, how's our employee? Are they doing what you need them to do? And we could do some things there. The other one, obviously, is to try to reach out to our students, our former students who have graduated, and ask if they've have those jobs, as they've done with Martin. It's a little bit trickier there, because we have to be able to track them down and get their responses. The last one was really to create some of the FRC handbooks and policies and procedures so that we knew that. One of them, our WSU Tech instructors are great, but they don't always have that pedagogy knowledge or the background, especially in classroom management, that our instructors and teachers do that have done that for K-12 for some time. So just really getting there, and some expectations and other critical topics. We've outlined this there. The next step for us at the Future Ready Center, we worked and we have a draft with Mrs. Johnson's office of a strategic communication plan, so that we make sure that we're reaching our target audiences and making sure that we've reached out those. Offering field trips and tours to our current students. So we've done that with really sophomores have been our target audience there. So out of our healthcare 200 new students, 160 of them, I think right now are current sophomores to be juniors. We've just done that in a lot of different ways, listening to schools and letting them direct me and our staff on what the best way at their school to target those kids. And so if that was dropping into sophomore English classes at Northwest and giving the same 15-minute pitch, I think it was 23 times in 2 days, which was fun. It's a lot of fun to see students and be able to interact with them. Same at West, or we're doing a whole class, a whole school assembly with sophomores and juniors at Northeast Magnet. We've let them direct kind of their best way, and sometimes they want to handle it themselves, and they've done a great job, and that's what East High did. East High the counselors did it, and they've had probably one of the best responses so far. Outside of that, finishing our student handbook and a contract for us. We have a parent meeting at the end of April that we want to present that to staff or to students and parents so they understand kind of the obligations that this is college level courses and that it's a little bit more rigorous than maybe they're there, to keep developing industry relationships and partnerships, and then to increase our student internships. One of the most hardest hurdles that we didn't expect was that students didn't want to take them because they wanted to stay with us and take classes at the FRC. It's great, but we need you to go and find some industry work as well. And so we get it, and we talked with some of our industry partners on how we can better do that, and they've been very receptive. And they ask us, how do we get them to apply for our internships? I said, can you come here and help them? And I said, we can do it, but if you're here doing it, they'll feel more confident about it. And they have, and they've done a great job. It's been a fun obstacle to make sure that we don't have too often two competing industry partners in the Future Ready Center on the same day, which has happened. With that, questions? I suppose.
Thank you. I want to lift up two quick things. First off, this may not be what we traditionally think of as a student achievement report, but this was all about student outcomes and student achievement tonight. Eric mentioned the rigor. Eric mentioned credentials, college credit, right? All of these things are what we want from kids. We don't always see it show up on a state assessment sophomore year that a kid finds fairly irrelevant. But if we have 92% of our kids passing these tests first time through, we're doing something right, and our whole system has done something right up to that point. Our kids know how to read, they know how to do math, they're able to pass the EMT test, the CNA test. They have academic skills, even though that isn't the story that always gets told. The other thing is our vision, our mission to create life, college, and career-ready students. You heard Eric talk about interviewing and asking about wages, and it doesn't surprise me to hear that some of our students wouldn't want to branch out into an internship because they don't always see themselves in that work life, right? They don't always see themselves, even my own kids sometimes may not. So what a great transition to help a kid go from the school life to the work life and to get a taste of that and really see if they like it. So great job, Eric, and I'll let you guys ask questions as you want.
Melody?
Thank you. I just have a question about recruitment. I noticed, and you already identified, that West High and North High were going to be your predominant schools that actually had students in more students. So how do you recruit? I know you go out, and how else?
Sure, absolutely. It really started last summer, and so the goal was to meet with each principal from their base schools and the traditional high schools, just to make sure that they had questions and they knew what the program was, that they felt more comfortable, because they're ultimately a gatekeeper for us. If those programs are going to be successful, we need to have their, not that they were going to end up doing a lot of the recruitment. So meeting with each one of the high school principals was a start. And then in the fall, I met with every counseling department. And so we met with every counseling department to do the exact same thing again. From there, we've held a number of either assembly sessions. So we've identified kids through, through Zello. Zello is their one of their interest inventories that they take to help identify students. So we started with some schools there. It really has been, like I said, how each counseling department, and we've really relied on the counseling department to kind of help guide us through that, on what they think would work best for their school. And that's where, like at Northwest, I've spent a lot of time recently. From there, we've started with field trips, and we've offered, if you're interested, what we've understood is that students, for them to sign up, they need to be able to see the Future Ready Centers. Sure. And I don't blame them, right? I wouldn't buy a house without visiting. I wouldn't take a job without visiting the location, and I wouldn't attend a school if I couldn't see it. And so what we've done is we've gone through, and either myself or the counselors, we've even used WSU Tech through some of their sessions where they meet with our students already to say, if you're interested and want to attend the Future Ready Center, we have a field trip set for West High so West High and who else is Wichita Children's Home's coming tomorrow. West High is coming Thursday. Southeast is coming Thursday. Northwest came last Friday, and so did Northeast Magnet came last Friday. And so from there, we've tried to offer those same things. We're working with a few of our high schools, South and Heights, to identify the same thing, but really just finding each one of the niches for what they think works for them. And the other part of it that I've really enjoyed, I guess, is if we did the same thing at every high school, we'd know if it worked or didn't work. But if we do different methods at different high schools, we'll find out what works the best. So I can tell them, hey, this worked really well at East High. Do we want to try that here? And then they can say, yeah, or yeah, we tried that at South High and it didn't work at all. And so there might be different just feedback that we gain from all those.
Just an add-on. I didn't know that phlebotomy had a certification.
Mm-hmm.
I was a phlebotomist in the 11th and 10th grade. I loved it. But when did they start certifying?
Oh, I'm not sure. I could ask, but I'm.
Do you still do it?
Only with my questions.
Touche, yeah.
That's a great comment.
I would add to that, we also were very intentional. We recently had an in-service, and we were intentional. We brought all of the CTE staff to North High School so that we could have the opportunity to let them go through the FRC, the manufacturing. Because again, those teachers, you may have a student that's in your class, and let's say it's a culinary, but you identify maybe some interest or some skills in that kid, and now if you've seen the manufacturing FRC, you can tell that student about it. So it'll be interesting to see what dividends that may pay for us as well. But I do want to publicly thank Eric. He has worked very hard on this recruiting effort, and it's showing. So
Thank you, gentlemen. Do you guys still have the tours open every week?
Yeah, absolutely. So the manufacturing, I mean, we're always touring with anyone, anytime they want to drop by. We've kind of said the best time for us at both either the manufacturing or healthcare are Wednesdays around 2:30. It's just a little bit easier to plan that. With it, our staff's available at that time. But you're welcome to drop by either facility. Obviously, if you give us a heads up, we'll be a little bit more prepared. But both Melody Robinson at the Healthcare FRC and Tammy Kuipers, our teachers at either facility at the Manufacturing FRC, would be happy to show you around or anyone else. It's just obviously we want to make sure our students are safe. So if the public likes to come out, we'd like for that to be probably after school hours would be best.
Very good. So our Future Ready Manufacturing Center, it is quite an impressive environment that I know we've done tours there, we've brought a lot of people through and everything, and most of the time the response is you can't explain what is going on there until you have to go to see it, because there's an airplane that the students are building, there's CNC machines, there's laser engravers, there's a lot of cool stuff in there. And so I know we've had a number of high profile people that have come on tours through there. So Superintendent, can you explain, just list out some of the people that have gone on tours through both the manufacturing and the healthcare?
Yeah. So fairly early on, Governor Kelly came when really there was just a plane and a couple other things in there. And if you saw it as we've progressed, it's kind of built out in ARPA money through the city. We got a grant from the city that funded a lot of the equipment. Senator Roger Marshall hosted a roundtable there, as did Governor Kelly. We had a contingent from Mobile, Alabama come as a kind of a sister city trip. So it was their tech school, their K-12, their mayor, and so a group of about 20 to 25 of them came and toured. Dr. Ben Proctor from KSD's come. Dr. Watson's going to come soon. And we've hosted several events with the Greater Wichita Partnership. So they had their investor meeting at the Future Ready Center, which brought in about 200 or so community members. We also had our own talent roadmap workforce roundtable with about 100 people in there. So lots of different opportunities to have connection. And I say a lot, part of the marketing efforts, part of what we do, the best selling point for to talk to a kid is a trusted adult in their life. So all of us are trusted adults in the lives of kids in the district. And sometimes all it takes is, hey, Tim, have you ever heard about the Future Ready Center? You know, I think you may look into that. A lot of times that's really all it takes, kind of that word of mouth marketing. But it really is kind of the ultimate, you know, win-win-win across the district of getting kids ready, getting kids skills for the future, and listening to our community and valuing what they say. We need workers that do blank, and then we respond to that. It's also, you know, we've heard in the listening sessions over the past few weeks, well, what about growth? Right? Have you thought about ways to increase enrollment? Have you thought about ways to do to drive that revenue up? And this, truthfully, is one of our avenues. Is that we would take out of district, if we have seats available, we take out of district kids to fill these seats, which could boost our enrollment. So and boost that revenue number. So this is, we don't have a lot of places that we can insert that, but this would be one that is a possibility, at least as far as continuing to promote and recruit. So
Very good. Thank you. Kathy?
So to piggyback on that, since we have sold the property at Northwest High School for a new police substation, would you please share with us your vision of, in the future, perhaps getting a pipeline of law enforcement future ready center?
right, sure. And so that's always a question, you know, that overwhelms Eric just a little bit. What's next? You know, how many future ready centers will there be? We have talked about an IT or cyber or computer science future ready center next, with hopefully maybe a soft launch in the fall, where that's not kind of ready to go quite yet, but we'd like to get the ball moving in that. Those are the three kind of main areas that we hear from industry that we need to invest in is IT, manufacturing, and healthcare. But beyond that, we have opportunities for fire science and for police science that we've talked about. And really, it's as much about making sure these options are options for kids across the district, that they've created a mechanism for kids to apply or show interest. It isn't an application, but show interest. Here's how I get my foot in the door in this. We had some one-off kids from time to time go and do these CTE programs, but it wasn't systematic. There wasn't an easy button to get kids from point A to point B, and that's what we have now. So,
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, President Reeser is still out. So, Patrick, next item.
Thank you, guys.
Next item, consent.
Kathy, do you have
I
any
have
items to
nothing
pull?
Nope.
Nothing to pull.
Nothing to pull.
I have nothing to pull.
Nothing to pull.
Sure. No items to pull for me. Did everyone else get asked?
Yeah, no items.
No items pulled. I'm in move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Stan, seconded by Julie to adopt the consent agenda. Motion carries 6-0. Patrick, next item, please.
Next item, under reports, United Teachers of Wichita. No,
Welcome, Katie.
Good evening, President Reeser, Vice President Albert, school board members, Superintendent Bielefeld. I know there were some hard choices tonight, and I want to remind everyone that this is a problem originating out of Topeka and that our students are being made to pay the price. We've had to have years of long battles to ensure that our funding remains at pace with inflation. Our legislators in Topeka are failing our kids, and our legislators are failing us. Right now, during the session, we're already gearing up for another battle to ensure that our special education funding reimbursements are met, because if the folks in Topeka were doing what they were supposed to do, we wouldn't have this budget shortfall to begin with. So where does that leave us? Because our students deserve better than learning in buildings that have deferred maintenance with staff layoffs or the choice to walk farther to school. We need a new and we need to come together to find real solutions for this budget crisis. We need sustainable solutions that work for our teachers, our students, and our communities. This is a short-term solution to a problem that we've known that we would have for at least half a decade. So what is the long-term solution? What's being done to ensure that we don't have to have these same conversations next year about staff reductions and school closures? Wichita deserves better than these choices that get us through one budget cycle and not beyond that. I don't have to reiterate the anxiety that's been expressed to me by parents and teachers alike. We all know that there's a plan in place to prevent this from. We all need to know that there's a plan in place to prevent this from happening again, and ensure that all of our teachers and our students are taken care of so we can have a healthy community. And we all need to be ready to vote in November like the future of our schools depend on it, because it does, and that's become very clear over the course of the last few months. Our educators, they're going to be there tomorrow to support our students, and I know in the fall at the Welcoming Schools, they'll be there to support the new staff and the students. But we need to ensure that our kids, our parents, and our teachers' needs are met, because we are all one community and in this together. So, thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Patrick, next item, please.
Next item, under reports, Service Employees International.
And Esau did tell me he would not be here this late. He anticipated that this was going to run late. Patrick, next item, please.
Next item under reports, Superintendent's Report.
I need my microphone. Thank you. I'll keep it brief tonight. I do want to sincerely thank all of the board members and Hazel for showing up for families and listening and being there for them. It does mean a lot. Your presence means a lot, and I think it made a big difference and helped shape and form kind of where we ended up. A couple good things. We had the Magnet Schools presentation tonight that was pretty exciting. We've also had a senior at Heights, Angel Yanez, who was named a Wallace Scholar, which means $30,000 to attend WSU, which is pretty significant. So congratulations to Angel. And then a lot of basketball going on this week. If you're not aware, the state tournament starts here at Koch Arena for the 6A teams, and the Heights girls play on Wednesday, and East, Heights, and Northwest boys all play on Thursday. So we have 3 of the 8 teams, and the boys' side are Wichita Public Schools teams. And congratulations also to the Heights girls. Last thing is I had talked to Dan about a possible executive session tonight. I think we're all probably at our max. So, and with Hazel not being here, I think she's an important part of that meeting too. So what I'll probably do is have Joseph look at schedules maybe for that week after spring break. If we can all find an hour that we could meet and just recess into executive session for an hour, and then that would just be the entire meeting. If we'll try to find something that works for everybody so we can not be here till March 5th. So that's all for my report.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Patrick, next item, please.
Next item under reports, Board of Education reports.
This is the reports section. I have no report. Knock.
No report.
Diane.
No report.
Melody.
I would like to place on our agenda for when we meet again to be able to discuss, and I've had a conversation with both superintendent as well as president about the policy 11, I believe it's 1160.
It is.
That more specifically speaks to the issue of diversity, equity, and accountability committee that I'd like for us to look at, what shall I say, updating it so that it will inform us as we move forward with the decision that's been made to close the buildings and choose to do the different boundaries, I think that it would be very important for us to have a community, a committee that is made up of the community, and actually I'm going to read what it says here, not all of it, but the Diversity, Equity, and Accountability Committee shall consist of 15 members who shall be selected in the following manner. And that's what we'll have to more than likely update, because I believe this was done during the era of DSEG when we were challenging busing. And so I believe that it would be relevant for us to actually have it district-wide as opposed to the 4 districts that were specified within the original policy. And just very briefly, consisting of community citizens and a director of equity, and I see our director is here. So Director of Equity and Accountability, serving as ex officio, shall assist the Board of Education in an advisory capacity in developing, monitoring, and implementing policies and decisions of the board in transitioning. So that's just the beginning of it. I'm sure we'll have probably legal that will look at this and others to figure out how we can best craft it such that it meets our needs now with the boundary decisions that we're making. I think it's important to have that input from the community.
Thank you, Melody. I
Thank
actually
you.
have that on my, after we finish these board education reports, and if there's any new business, I actually have a Board of Education request that addresses that specifically.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other party?
No other report.
Okay, I didn't want to. Julie?
No report.
Kathy?
No report.
Thank you. Patrick, next item, please.
Next item under miscellaneous, new business.
Seeing none. Patrick, next item.
Next item under miscellaneous, Board of Education requests.
I am going to start tonight. My request is that the district leadership prepare a proposal for a new board policy creating a new and updated diversity, equity, and accountability committee, which will assist the school district in monitoring and promoting diversity and equity in district schools and district programs. The proposed policy should describe the objectives, outcomes, and composition of that committee, which would be reported to the superintendent, and he brings us that after the April meeting. That's going to be my request. Knock, any board requests?
Oh, did you already make your board request?
That was my board request.
I was going to ask if you could add an amendment to, for this community to also look at the academic data with the students moving from closing schools to welcoming schools. I think just from diversity, equity, and accountability perspective, we should probably look at that.
It's not actually a motion. It's just my request, and so I'll share details of that because some of this has to be vetted through legal and stuff on what we can, because we're also talking about personnel information records. Yeah, if you would, you and I should definitely get together and talk about what you want to add to my request.
Or if I make a separate.
Yeah,
I'm
you
just
sure.
I'm just trying to see how we can make this more efficient.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Yeah. Did you have any other requests, Knock?
That was all.
Okay. Diane, do you have any Board of Education requests?
I do not have any requests.
Melody? No. Julie?
None.
And Kathy?
None.
And we are skipping the executive session? Yes. Okay. Patrick, next item, please.
Next item after executive session and reconvening is adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
I second.
Moved by Stan, seconded by Kathy to adjourn. Hopefully we'll have a normal meeting in April. Knock, do you want to adjourn? Motion carries 6-0. We are adjourned. See everyone in April, if not before.